particular. But so this is, I'm really happy to do this kind of impromptu thing at the Wexner. I'm super appreciative of the help from Alana and Sherry and this pain in the ass, whom you all know, right? I mean, I think all of you know Jeff in some way or another. So rather than do the kind of standard intro, I wanted to just tell you guys a quick story. So in 1996, I was in Jeff's studio in what was then Ives Hall, alongside a guy by the name of Frank Giorlando. One day, Frank came in with a yo-yo, and he spent most of the next week or two just doing yo-yo tricks in the studio. He was really good at the yo-yo.
Where was this?
In your studio. Now, it turns out Jeff was really good at the yo-yo, too. And, you know, Jeff is pretty competitive, so challenges were made and accepted. And before long, we had arranged a competition in the center court of the now demolished City Center Mall. And Frank and Jeff had a yo-yo off. And it was fantastic. Did you go to that, Rob? No. It was great. Now, I forget. I can't remember who won, but I'm sure if you ask Jeff, he'll say he did. And so afterwards, an obvious question arose. And so, you know, somebody asked Jeff, you know, how'd you get so good? And he just looked and said, practice. And we pressed him a little more, and so he continued. You know, the thing is, it's all about muscle memory. And I'm pretty sure this is like one of his famous made-up footnotes. He's like, but in order to really internalize an activity, you have to do it 700 times correctly. And if you can do that, then it's like, it's yours forever. And so that was the answer to the how question. The question that didn't get asked that day, and I realized should have, was why did you bother getting so good at the yo-yo? Now, just this morning, I was having breakfast with a novelist friend of mine in Cleveland, in fact, and we were talking about writing, and actually more talking about how much time we spent not writing. He had become obsessed with Go, you know, the Chinese board game, and I have been lately blowing entire afternoons playing blues harmonica. Doing administrative tasks within the section. And we marveled at how much time we spent doing these things, but we agreed that it wasn't time wasted, but rather that these marginal pursuits were somehow crucial to our day jobs as writers. And so, in other words, 20 years later, I answered that question, why did you get so good? Because the reason is because everybody needs a yo-yo. So tonight, Jeff's going to talk about the work of Rem Koolhaas, who will be visiting the Knowlton School in about 2 weeks, and Cindy Sherman, whose work is on view in the galleries here. And now, if you're thinking that this is material that's exactly in Jeff's wheelhouse, you're right. You know, it is. But at the same time, you're also wrong. Because, you know, as most of you probably know, Jeff has no formal training in art or architecture or criticism or theory. His degrees are in physics, but he never entered that field. Instead, he's devoted sustained 10,000 hour, 700 times level attention to such varied pursuits as art dealing, crime, miniature golf, exhibition curating, animal training, the piano, boutique farming, architectural criticism, and more. So, in other words, for Jeff, it's all yo-yo. That's right. And that is right. Thank you. And I would wager that's also what makes his thinking so original, what makes his ideas so influential, and what makes his writing and speaking so damn good. So, with that, I will welcome my pal Jeff.
My pal Jeff. Isn't that sweet? So, when I actually yo-yoed, they were about this big, and they were made of granite, and the thing in the middle, you had to like I mean, it was a really hard thing to do. Originally, the yo-yo was a war weapon invented in the Philippines about 5,000 years ago. It's true. And you would throw it down and you'd hit somebody on the head, and then you'd pull it up like this. So now they have this double clutch bearing system. So you can be an expert yo-yoer in about 2 minutes. And all the world champion yo-yoers are under 10, because they're the only people that can move that fast, keep up with it, and when it hits them in the head or hits them anywhere, that nothing breaks because they're still made of all cartilage. So you should watch. Sanford Quinter's son is a world-class yo-yoer. I got into it because of Tommy Smothers. I mean, you know, I got into it because every time I tried one of the, what do you call those things? No. No, a top. There was a Duncan yo-yo and a Duncan top, and you throw the top back and you pull it back and you catch it in your hand, and I kept hitting myself in the eye. So I just need to know something. How many of you are in architecture? Oh, shit. Is anyone in art? Anybody here at all from the world of art? Okay, so you're already going to know everything I got to say about Koolhaas. I probably should say a lot more about art. Anyway, some of the slides will be funny. So my problem is, and the reason I'm so late is I don't have any idea how long this lecture is. So what I'm going to do is start this, and when it gets about 50 minutes or so, I'll wind it down, and wherever I am, that's the end of the lecture. So don't you worry, won't be too long. And don't worry if you don't understand anything. It doesn't mean it's difficult. It means I'm probably not making good sense. It's probably incoherent. Have you seen the show? Raise your hand if you've gone to the show. That's good. That's actually a... Raise your hand if you're in architecture and you're in this building and you've actually been to the Wexner Center voluntarily. I'll take out the voluntarily. Okay. That's good. See, now you're supposed to be surprised at this. The person on the left is Rem Koolhaas. The person on the right is Cindy Sherman. That's an actual photograph that's in the show. You should think to yourself, how did he do that? And the reason and the ability to do that was because I found that picture of Rem Koolhaas online, which is what I do all day long. I really need 60 hours a week of free time to do what I do. So I just thought it was funny. I really did have something to say about this. Oh, yeah. So there's a whole series of clowns by Cindy Sherman. So let me just, there's one more thing if you're a student in here, do you have any idea about her work at all? I mean, raise your hand if you kind of know something about Cindy Sherman's work. Okay, that's good. Because the purpose of this lecture is to draw relationships between Rem Koolhaas's architectural work and Cindy Sherman's artwork that I think exist or that are important to me, but that I've never read anything about or seen anything about. And so I searched I would search search online, Google and stuff for the last couple of weeks to see if I could find anybody else that had written anything else about it. And until this lecture got posted on the website of the Wexner Center and came up when I searched it, nothing would come up. And then one day I put in Sherman and Koolhaas and it, bang, Kipnis discusses Sherman and Koolhaas. Now I teach in my class that if you think you have a good idea and you Google it to find out if it's an original idea and nothing comes up, it's a bad idea. Don't do it. the only time you know you have a good original idea if a lot of people are looking into it. Then, I know it's depressing when you first find out that other people are thinking about it, but that means it's a good idea. If a lot of people are thinking about it at the same time, that's a fantastic idea. If you keep putting your topic in and nothing comes up, it sucks. So anyway, so this whole thing started when I was 13, and I went to New York City. My grandparents took me to the World's Fair in 1965. Believe it or not, they gave me, they wanted to go visit their family. I didn't want to go, so they gave me $40 one day that was free. And they showed me how to use the subway and let me hang around New York City out of my mind. Can you imagine that, 13-year-old? Here's $40, have some fun. Go to the parlors. So I went to the Museum of Modern Art. I ran into this painting and fell in love with it. See, this painting says back to me. That's good. Try to get in the swing of things. I love this painting. Anyway, I ran into pop art, and it changed my life. I fell in love with art, and I fell in love with art because it seemed a way to learn how to, I don't know, it spoke to me. I don't really know why. And so I'm going to talk to you about Cindy Sherman's work because I've been following it since since she started. I've been involved in art. She started in the late 70s. But it's possible you don't really have to know art historically, and you don't have to know art chronologically. So I thought to myself, wonder if you walked in, the very first thing you saw was a work from 2003, like you saw these two clowns. And you thought, wow, that's fantastic. This is not characteristic of Cindy Sherman's work. Most of Cindy's work up until now was pictures of a woman, her, dressed in many different outfits, trying on many different characters, and all of a sudden here are two persons and a really extraordinary painting or a photograph. She's actually, she uses a camera and takes photographs, but she's comes from what they call the picture generation. Next week, a very important art critic is going to be coming here to discuss her work in particular. I'm going to try not to step on his toes too much, talk about topics that he might talk about. He was the breakthrough critic for the generation of artists called the picture artists, meaning that they weren't photographers, they weren't painters, they made pictures. So it wasn't important to know the history of painting or the history of photography so much as to understand what was going on in pictures. And also Ren will be coming to talk, so I'm not going to talk too much about new work. I'm going to try, these connections. So, but let's say you start with this. Is that okay? Sure, it's okay. And that's why I think it's a bad idea. And one of the things I'm trying to convince you is if you're an architect or you're an artist, you're not a historian. Your job is not to be a historian or to be a theorist. Your job is to do your work and to start wherever you want to start and to use whatever impulses or motivations or inspirations you can get. That's what happened to me. I think this is an amazing Cindy Sherman, but I know her body of work, so I see it as a late Cindy Sherman. And for me, I'm not a woman. So when I follow Cindy Sherman's work, even though I understand the discourse of Cindy Sherman, most of the critics that write about Cindy Sherman write about her feminist influences, or the consequences of her work for feminism. I don't do that. I think about the consequences of her work for the mobility of character. When I'm looking at her work, I see it as allowing me to see myself in the characters that she portrays. So I don't think of Cindy Sherman's work as being about women and the many roles they have to play. I think of it as about people and the many roles they have to play and the many roles I have to play, and how fantastic it's been for me to learn that other people go through that, have to go through that, whether they like it or not. Sometimes you're in characters you don't want to be in. Sometimes you want to learn how to do new characters. And the fact that we can have this agility of character or be in new characters turns out to be a fantastic talent and also a horrible burden. Sometimes you get forced to be in characters, or you find someone else can put you in a character you don't want to be in. And so learning these issues has been my relationship to her work and has nothing to do with what most people think her work is about. That's why this talk is so idiosyncratic. Now, that means that if this is the first thing you see two people and neither one of them are women. That makes this a totally ridiculous way to start with Sidney Sherman. But for me, all of a sudden, because I'm looking at it from the point of view of me knowing Sidney Sherman's work, all of a sudden I start to think, okay, I'm also two people. I'm not just one person. I'm not only two people, I'm neither one, I'm not a man or a woman, I'm just two clowns, one making fun of another, as me. So I don't expect you to see that, but because I'm practiced that way, this is a deeply poignant, but funny, but horrifying image for me. And it won't be for you, but when you go see that show, other things will happen. And what I'm going to try to suggest is once you get to understand Rem's work, the same kind of thing will be happening for you, which is an amazing thing for architecture to be doing. Point being, don't worry about getting stuff right. Worry about making stuff happen. So actually, how this whole talk started is you buy this book called Small, Medium, Large, and Extra Large. You should go, it's a pretty good book. It's all of Rem's work up till 1993. And in an important point in the work, actually I think, so there's the book on the left. When it starts to discuss this project I know pretty well. This is the competition entry for the Trey Grand Bibliothèque competition. One of the 1989 projects, one of the most important projects he ever did, an unbuilt project, had a dramatic effect on all of architecture. And as he's describing this project in the middle of this book, you get this page, and in the middle of this page, there's this photograph in the upper right-hand corner. And it's a library, and so you look at it and you think, okay, I guess that's a library. And then if you look at the caption, there's a little plan, and it just says storage. And I'm thinking to myself, I know it by 1993. I know Sidney Sherman's work extremely well. This is one of the Untitled film stills, and I think, what a bizarre thing. Why, no reference to it at all. Of course, it's credited in the back, but why would he stick Sidney Sherman in the middle of this project, which I know extremely well, and which I'm already upset about, because in 1993, he's describing this project in certain terms. I've already written about this project in a previous publication. He's now describing this project in terms totally different than I understood this project to be from my discussions with him personally. He's telling the world that this project is about one thing, when I know for a fact that when he did this project, it was about something entirely different, and he's not mentioning that at all. And all of a sudden I see Sidney Sherman, I think, what's this all about? So that's how this entire issue started. So I made it bigger so you could see storage. What's she looking at? Isn't that a weird question? What's she doing there? And look at that plan. Like, is that a great plan? Like, is that the most important page? There's the actual photograph. Now this photograph is called it's from a series called An Untitled Film Still. Now I'm going to tell you something. I love works of art, and I also love shows and exhibitions. Exhibitions are not the same thing as works of art. There's movie stars, and then there's movies. So when you go see a movie, you're not going to see the movie star. When you go to see a show, you're not going to see works of art. So when you go see that show in there, you're not going to see works of art. You're going to see a curator and an installer put works of art into a show, which is a fantastic thing. And it will say certain things to you about how the works of art are being put on display and set into motion as if they're in a movie. And I love that, whether they do a good job or a bad job. And in this case, in some places they do a good job, and in some places they do a bad job. The tendency is always to think that the artist knows best, that they have the last say of whatever that they want to say. All the other works in that show, except this one group called the Untitled Film Stills, are untitled. And they're numbered. And when you go up and you see the names, and they're grouped in series, they put on the wall, Untitled number 273. That's a funny thing to put up. I go, ha, 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 that's really funny. So when you go to a museum, one of the things they do when they put the labels up is they cause something called the museum minuet. It goes like this. So that's a dance everyone does in a museum when they go to a show. And a brilliant choreographer who worked here made a movie about that dance. He actually wrote a line on a wall, and everybody got down here to read it, and then he videoed it. Yeah. So you should read but all the other works in the show, even though they put the word untitled up, which is a silly thing to do if something doesn't have a title, these are actually titled Untitled Film Stills. Untitled film stills because a film still is a kind of picture which requires that there be a film. So in other words, if you've seen the film Star Wars, there would be somebody on the set taking regular photographs of what's going on, and those would be the film stills. And you could buy film stills or see film stills, or they'll publish the film stills. But in this particular case, Cindy Sherman made up a film still of a film that doesn't exist. So an untitled film still is actually a title. So it's totally different from all the other works in the show in that it actually does have a title and requires that it has a title, which means it's a new kind of representation, unlike any of the other works in the show. And her work is all about new kinds of representation, ways that she's depicting herself, not as herself, but as a way of depicting a self so that you can put yourself in there and be another kind of self. So it's kind of an amazing thing to see. So when you go in there and you see, that's Untitled Film Still number 13. There is no film that's a film still of. So those are the kind of things I spend hours thinking about and then get famous talking to people about. Here's another great untitled film still. Now, this is one of my favorites. This is an untitled film still number 60. I thought this is the only one. For a long time, I thought this was taken in England because that thing over there. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe. Can you see my cursor? No. So you see the building in the background looks like one of those purpose-built high-rises in England. And I thought that guy looked a lot like Ram Koolhaas. So I used to think, I knew it wasn't Ram Koolhaas, but I thought this particular untitled film still had a curious way of reinforcing my interest in the relationship between them. That's her. That's obviously Cindy Sherman. But it looks like a man, you know. Remember, I said she hadn't taken there were no images of men until the clowns or the history paintings. I'll show you those. So all this time I was projecting myself into all of her characters, but they had to deviate because they were all women. I don't know, do any of you know Woody Allen movies? Woody Allen films? So one of my favorite plays is Streetcar Named Desire, and there are two characters in these plays that are so famous. One is Blanche Dubois, is that it? The other one is Stanley Kowalski. Now, people that know me always think I act like Stanley Kowalski, like an asshole. Like mean, loud, coarse. Deep inside, I actually feel like Blanche Dubois. That's how I actually feel. I know, I know. But I tell you, I've always depended on the kindness of strangers. And anyway, in this movie, Woody Allen plays Blanche Dubois, and Diane Keaton plays Stanley. And, you know, it's just like this. Anyway, you'll find out the truth about this. I learned the truth about this from the guy that's going to be talking next week, and that's all of a sudden ruined it for me. So be careful about learning, having an art historian come tell you stuff. Now, here's something I thought you'd find interesting. Let me see if I can find the other one. Okay, so, one of the slides is missing. So, after the atomic bombs were dropped in Japan, the U.S. the mathematicians did a statistical analysis of the deaths of that occurred in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And what they did was they divided the population into male and female, distance from the bombs, and age. Very simple. And so the graphs are very simple. Down the middle is 0, and then how far away on the left was men, how far away on the right was women, and the further you know, how many people died, and then by age groups. And they did it, took 3 years to do that, and when they turned that into the Japanese were furious because even though it gave them a portrayal of the deaths, it meant nothing to them. It had no content that they considered to be rational as a basis for describing their understanding of the characters and the identities of the people that had died. And so they insisted on money to study their own population according to what they understood to be a rational, objective understanding of the deaths of those people. And this is what they decided. And these were the categories. Instead of 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40 male, what they decided they need was, and you can see for yourself, I didn't bring my glasses, but it's stuff like other, you know, firstborn sons, secondborn sons, all other relatives. So these were the categories that they felt were objective. So these are the equivalent in mathematics to another culture's Cindy Shermanization of the objectivity of their population. And so it's been going on. This idea of what an identity was, it's been going on for a long time. You also know it from Andy Warhol's portraits. So a little bit of the history of the mobility of character that's been occurred to us. So all kinds of forms of representation. Now, when Andy Warhol painted this, he almost got arrested. He was called to testify for the House Un-American Activities Committee. Nixon had just gone to China. He painted this painting. It was considered an outrage. Mao Zedong was a great enemy of our country. Painted this. He then painted these series. This series was bought. It was an edition of 25. One of the editions was bought by Peter Lewis for a company in Cleveland, Progressive Insurance Company. Everyone in the company headquarters that day walked out, threatened to go on strike. 10,000 people left the office. It was installed. Peter Lewis just said, quit, I don't care. He bought them. They got installed. Here they are today. And what you'll see is they almost look like placemats for the color of clothes that you wear. They actually work so beautifully to reinforce the commonality of that position. That's a sort of don't dress up on Fridays. That when Peter Lewis died and his family decided, he paid $25,000 for them. They sold for $1.25 million. And so the family sold them. There was a petition. Everybody in the company petitioned to keep them. They loved them so much. And so the work was not political. It was not about the representation of the person, but about the kind of dress up, the cosmetic quality of it. And I think you can see it at work really beautifully here. So this is one of my favorites. And sometimes it's good to know some history. Sometimes it hurts to know some history. This is a Untitled film still number 2. The first 6 were all about the kind of the life of a blonde girl. You could say that the first 6 were film stills of the same film. So, you know, same person, same apartment. It's very interesting about this particular one is if you're in the art world and you care about art and you see somebody looking in the mirror and the mirror is looking back at you, that sends a cue to you. You know, that's a historical trope. So sometimes it's good to know that, sometimes it's not. When she did this, my guess is she probably didn't know it. because she's looking too directly back. To give you an idea about this, though, I'm going to tell you a little personal history. This is this is Velazquez's Las Meninas. Many people consider the greatest painting, or one of the greatest paintings in Western civilization. Very famous essay written about it by Foucault, an important philosopher. I think it's a stupid painting. It's one I really don't like this painting because it's got all kinds of stupid reflections, and you can see the prints, and you see the mirrors in it, and it's got this and it's got that, and it's just it's like a children's toy, frankly. But Velazquez is one of my favorite painters, and this is my favorite painting in the world by Velazquez, and my favorite painting, I think, in history, because the space in it is so modern. And this is a portrait of an actor who is considered a buffoon. These are considered the buffoon paintings. And he's standing in this space, and you can feel every ounce of his existential existence. The greatness of his character, and the patheticness of his existence as he's basically a show dog for Prince Henry II. The king. The second of these, I think, is fantastic, is this painting. Now, I want you to pay very close attention to this painting because he's in a corner. This is one of the very first paintings in history in which someone is sitting in a corner, that occurs in a corner at all. And that's because that's where he lived, Caballeros. He was like a jester. But also notice a Pentimenti, this stuff right here. You see that doubling right there? Or this is right there? That happened because Velazquez didn't like where it was, and he moved it. So he painted over the old one and repainted it. And he was kind of a jerk. He knew that in about 25 years that paint was going to become transparent. You'd be able to see that. Didn't really care. He knew he'd be dead. He knew. And he was he was very casual about his painting technique. He would actually clean his paint on the empty canvas, knowing that in another 25 years people would be able to see through it. But this painting and this doubling is kind of interesting. I want you to. So this is a painting by Rauschenberg. So I think it's my favorite painting in the 20th century. It's got that a woman at the mirror. See that woman at the mirror? So that's called this trope is called a Venus at her toilet. It's a long history of painters painting people at the mirror. That's it, actually. And so she's looking at the mirror. The mirror, if you see, she doesn't quite look back at herself. She looks at me. And this begins this whole process. Actually, you can see it all the way back. You see people in mirrors, seeing at mirrors, and there's the painter's painting, and you can see all kinds of things. No mirrors here, no mirrors there. But in that one, what's great there, though, is Rauschenberg whites out the Cupid. You now look over to the doubled. See the two helicopters are not really two. There's the same helicopter reprinted twice. And then, so now the Venus is now looking at the helicopters, and the gaze goes around, and you sort of follow the white down, and all of a sudden you look at the floor. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a black line. I'm doing this short, but there's all kinds of doubling. You see there's two cubes. You see that the eagle's head is doubled back on its shoulder. Then there's a bird there and a bird to the right. And so there's doubling and doubling and doubling. And what you actually realize is, and it's in a corner. You see the corner floor? And so Rauschenberg has set all of this in a room. And that room is a museum, as if to say, like a jester, all of the world is being put into a museum. And it's a kind of another way of showing the character. It's a beautiful painting. So all of these are ways that our self-image, our constructions of ourselves gets more and more and more sophisticated, that what used to be the jester in the corner is now the role of art and the role of the museum. And so it's something we no longer feel bad about. We're proud of ourselves about it. So you can see the doubling. So in that case, it's good to know a little history. In this case, so this is Cindy Sherman. This is one of her history paintings. It's in the gallery. Now, if you don't know any painting, great, you're lucky. Because you don't want to know anything about this painting. Because if you find out it's a copy of this painting or a relationship to this painting, it ruins it entirely. This is one of those cases that finding out that this history painting is a version of this painting gives you no information. There's nothing about what she's doing in this painting that is a comment or relationship to it. She's not, this is Bacchus, the god, eating so much grape he's sick. This is called The Sick Bacchus by Caravaggio. So she's not sicker. What she's doing is she's making what's called a tableau vivant, meaning in history you would, in France in particular in the 19th century or 18th century, people would dress up and dress up like paintings. Like you'd go in there for dinner and for the fun of it for about an hour, people would be dressed up like paintings. So you would actually see yourself, you'd be a painting or somebody would look at you acting like a painting. So this is a tableau. So it's increasing the urgency and the desire and the invitation to see yourself in the painting. The minute you do this, it ruins it. So sometimes you don't want to do this. Now, this is another of her history paintings. I think it's a fantastic painting. It's my favorite. Actually, I thought the theme of this painting was head of John the Baptist. Turns out not to be. I found out later it was. And I'm not going to show you the real painting. But for me, because up till now, I thought she had never painted another man's head, I'm looking and there's a man's head for the first time. This is before the clown's painting. And think, great. And not only that, if you look carefully at this painting, the man's head is more vivid and more alive than her face, which is now very mannequin-like. And so I'm becoming thrilled by this painting for my sake because my project in relationship to her painting. And so this cut-off head, the eyes are extremely visible. You should go see it. It's not a painting, it's a photograph. It's a picture. Then I find out in 2000, she starts to print pictures that she took in 1976 but never printed. These are called the bus stop pictures. She took all these pictures. These are all her. Fantastic pictures, super realism pictures. There's a guy. What ruined my whole thing, you know. There's a guy. Now, why didn't she print him, I think? And the reason I think she didn't print him is because this guy, Dwayne Hansen, was just hitting the market at the time, and there was this big sort of debate or tension between the super realists like him and the picture generation. You know, and she was, I think, worried about it. And so she waited. So these are sculptures. These are plastic sculptures. I don't know. So here's some quotes I want you to read. Notice that Rem talks about identity. The stronger the identity, the more it imprisons, the more it resists expansion, interpretation, etc. Now, of course, he's talking about a building. The stronger the identity of a building, meaning the more unusual it is, like Danny Libeskind or something like that. But actually, it works for any form of identity. The more powerful the identity, the more imprisoned you are by your own identity. And here's the ones that Cindy thinks. I didn't have any interest in traditional art. I wanted to do something that people could relate to without having to read a book beforehand. I think that's an important thing to read. She went to a fairly bad art school in Buffalo, New York. Then she moved down to New York. She started an art collective with Robert Longo. Robert Longo is another fabulous artist. They were partners, and then they moved to New York. He was a bookie. He loved to read books, and he went down, became friends with David Sally. My other favorite artist, and they talked books all the time, and she got bored and left. I feel I'm anonymous in my work. When I look at the pictures, I never see myself, so they aren't self-portraits. I'm trying to make other people see something of themselves. I never knew she said any of this. I don't look up art much. I mean, I find my own stuff, then I research it. So on the left, you'll see a text by Koolhaas with a very famous quote in it. I wish I brought my glasses. It says something like at the top, where there is architect, can you read it? Very famous, you should remember this. Where there is nothing, everything is possible. Where there is architecture, there, nothing else is possible. Now, I put this up because it was originally written the way it's written on the left. It was called Imagining the Nothingness, and what it was really about is just the bad voids in the city and imagining what to do with them. And his answer is fantasy. But being Rem Koolhaas, as time passes, he re-edits his work over and over and over again, and it turns into imagining nothing, and you can see the layout, and all of a sudden the first sentence, which is just a typical first sentence, gets turned into a grand epithet. And that's why stuff like the Sidney Sherman photograph, what I told you, the original story of all of his work changes. Everything you read about his work, everything he says about his work, everything he's going to tell you, it's not that he's lying to you, it's that he re-originates the work until it becomes something more and more and more. I think this is a fantastic thing. He is a Cindy Sherman in both his work. And so on the left is from the AA Files, 1985. This is from Small, Medium, Large, and Extra Large. Graham was a filmmaker. Cindy Sherman was a filmmaker. So this is the film group in 1925. I thought I would show you just a brief sample of. So this is Rem's very first film. Now, you should be, wait. Hang on. Okay, they're not seeing it. Should I not worry about it? Bruce. Oh, okay. Here, I'll do this. Oh, I probably just fucked up forever. Where's my guy? Oh, I am. Well, you're not going to get the film. You got any idea why that won't happen?
They may be showing up outside of PowerPoint.
Oh. Yeah, they are. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, I got it. I think I got it. I got it. All right. I tell you what, I'm going to skip this. If only I knew how to skip this. So Rem's is it's got a nurse in drag and a woman who's just given birth. It's a guy in drag. And let's see. All right. And she's talking about what a great nurse she is. And so there's all kinds of character mixture and stuff like that. And Cindy Sherman's is about a cutout doll that she's dressing up, and Big Hand takes it away from her. And so they're interesting. They're both films that are about the plasticity of character and the use of costume, and show the sort of commitment to film and the cinematics. And also appropriation of character, appropriation of image, and so I thought it made it for a nice coincidence. Now, Rem comes to New York at the same time that Bernard Tschumi does. So the question becomes, why doesn't Rem own the fact that he was a filmmaker more? Since I'm going to show how much film is part of his work. He comes to New York. He's a filmmaker. He's made 4 films, though this one he wrote and directed and acted in, and there's some very funny scenes in them. The reason is when he gets there just about the same time as Bernard Tschumi. And Bernard Tschumi has made and they both are interested in the question of the event. How does events affect architecture as much as form? And what Bernard does is he comes in and is explicitly making his work out of film. So this is Eisenstein's film, and you can see that it's the way that Eisenstein would choreograph the relationship between the music, the film, and he would set up the entire apparatus of the film and the montage. And then you can see that's the Promenade Cinématique from the Parc de la Villette. So Bernard was actively, I suppose this isn't going to work either. Should I try it? I better not even try it. Nope, let's just see. What the hell? No, I get it, you don't. Okay, this is that was Talking Heads doing the dance based on Robert Longo's drawings. One of the days go by. Yeah. Okay, but that was based on these drawings, Men in the City, plus the hamburger joint where the guy would serve his hamburgers. Do you know that song? You know that video? So if you watch that video, it's Robert Longo's drawings, plus the hamburger joint where the guy would serve the hamburgers like this. So you get here. One of these days, go by. So it's really important that you know all this. Okay, so Robert Longo did these drawings. These are about men falling. It's an incredible series. At the same time, he was working in collaboration with Bernard Tschumi. Now, Bernard Tschumi is arch enemies of Rem Koolhaas. They just came from the AA together. Robert Longo is dating Cindy Sherman. Cindy Sherman, Robert Longo, and Bernard Tschumi are showing at Helen Weiner's, first at Artist Space and then later on, which is where the critic next week organizes the show, and later on at Metro Pictures. And so it kind of closes the door on any relationship with the Metro Pictures where Rem may have wanted to pursue his own filmic interests. So you can see that in this Manhattan transcript by Bernard, you can see an echo or a gesture to Robert Longo. So you didn't see it, but the nurse in Rem's film made me think, how come there aren't any nurses in Cindy Sherman's? You would think all those characters, are there any nurses? So I Google Cindy Sherman nurses, and I find out she did this series from 1987. Sherry, have you ever seen these before? Okay, as far as I know, no one has ever seen this entire body of work in which she's done these diptychs called the doctor-nurse diptychs, which they're not very good. You know, it's very interesting. This is a very weak body of work, but there's 15 of them, and they're in third-rate museums all over the world. But I just thought I'd let you know. Now, on to the architecture. So where does this lead us? So at one point in my life, when I was teaching architecture seriously, I got sick and tired of people talking about modernism. Like if you're a journalist or you're a, hack, you can talk about modern architecture or modern space, but if you're really an architect, particularly if you're an OSU graduate, you can't do that. You've got to be able to distinguish kinds of modernism. You have to be able to say what's different about Korb and Mies and Wright and later on, Alto and Kahn, and even later than that. You have to be able to say how do these things what do they share that make them modern, and why are they different? And so what I did, when I sort of summed it up, that you could really get it down to these three houses and these three types. You start with these two archetypes on the left, the pyramid and the cube, which if you've been in my theory class, you know. You learn these three houses, and then you learn these three conditions and relationships to the ground. And the one that's important to us tonight is the one in the middle that says casting against type, and it's based on the Mies Farnsworth house. And you notice it's got a stair. And what it says is, unlike Le Corbusier, who felt like he and his architectural ideas through modernism could transform the entire political space, actually change reality by changing the relationship between the building and the ground, Mies was totally pessimistic about that. Mies thought basically architecture had a hopeless task, that the world was run by forces outside of architecture's purview, that really not much could be done about it. But what could be done was on occasion, you could allow someone to be in a different character, put them on a stage, make them feel differently, allow them to assume a different character, and because architecture had the ability to produce a theatrical setting. And with that talent and with that technique, you could produce joy, relief, pleasure, a wider range of experiences, but it would only be temporary. So you would get up on the stage with a staircase and you come off the stage. And that is the basis, I believe, of all of Rem's work. So Eisenman might be somebody you would think of for the top one, Eisenman and his followers. And for the bottom one, probably Herzog and de Meuron, and it's more crowded, so I would put Herzog and de Meuron and Stephen Hall. Like I said, it's a more crowded group, Tom Main, So that's how I'm trying to make it really easy for everybody to understand anything. So there's always these staircases. You notice you come up, you'll look straight out. You'll turn, you'll go inside the glass. So the glass is not a void. The glass is real in this case. It doesn't represent a void. You're inside, you're on stage. Whether it works, there it is again in Berlin. But notice this. When you get inside, you should recognize this feature. Because when Edith Farnsworth went to wash the dishes, her back is to the window. Now that is a very unusual thing to do to a client, particularly a woman client in the middle of an incredible, beautiful setting next to a river with glass all around, is to put her someplace where she feels like she's on view, not seeing the view. And so it's a particularly curious idea. That's the Cindyist Shermanist idea you'll ever see. And so Koolhaas, in his first project, does Villa de Lava. And what he does is he puts all three of these buildings, all three of those buildings into one building. So on the top is a quotation of Villa Savoie, and on the bottom is the quotation of the Glass House and the Farnsworth House. And you get the Farnsworth House when you open the doors, both sliding doors of the Glass House, and that means that the sliding doors turn the Farnsworth House and the Glass House into the Farnsworth House. And so I won't belabor this, but now this reflection becomes really important. So the high reflectivity in the Glass House was one of the distinctions between the Glass House and the Farnsworth House, which had very low reflections. So there is Philip. You try to take a picture there, you get a lot of wallpaper effects. So there's Philip being reflected from the inside. Andy Warhol. Remember, we've already discussed Andy Warhol. He's going to show up a lot. Andy Warhol kissing Philip Johnson. And Rem Koolhaas taking a picture from the outside of them on the inside. Now, those windows are not windows. They are windows from the point of view of a building, in the sense that they let in air and light and views. But from the point of view of an architecture, that's a quote. So it's a quote of a building that doesn't exist, since the Villa Savoye doesn't have 6 panels. What has 6 panels is this building, or maybe this version of that. So this is what another version of the simulacrum. So we have a much richer palette of thinking about how you produce these effects than bad copy, good copy, fake copy. Just like we have a much richer palette of what we mean by a personality. So in John Haydick's case, the view out and the view in matter, and the look matter. In what's this guy's name? Yeah, Venturi. The view out doesn't matter. All he cares about is the view of. What's fantastic about the Villa de Lava is it totally changes the relationship between each of the persons in the house. The mother and the father and the daughter each have a separate space. They don't communicate with each other. There's no common space. Famously, the father and the daughter speak to each other through the window. Let's see if I can get a picture. So the other cantilever, there's 36 columns under this cantilever, and there's none under the other cantilever on the other side. Exactly the same number of columns that are in Villa Savoye. Overstructured on this side, understructured on the other side. Split like another, there's the mother's space. That's how she communicates with the husband. So this is the view of how the daughter talks to the father. So, just in that case, it's sort of obvious Cindy Sherman apartment composition. So now we're going to look at this one. This is a really incredibly interesting building. And how does it show up here? So, the Bibliothèque Nationale is one of 3 buildings that Koolhaas did in 1989, a banner year for him, 3 competition entries. This, Zeebrugge, which is a port competition, and another one called the ZKM, which is a media. And so, like I said, this is the strange page. Now, when he did this competition, I was living about a mile from him. We would meet for breakfast occasionally in London. And as he was telling me the story about this, he was saying, I'm going to redo the library in a completely new way, because Paris has nothing to do with walking down the boulevards in a promenade. What you do in Paris is you go out, you get in a tunnel, you take the metro, so you're in a tunnel, you land in a metro station, and then you do your business, and then you go back in a tunnel and you go back out. So his idea was to make a building which re-originates essentially the metropolitan experience of being in Paris as a moving in the tunnels and doing your work in an isolated fashion and then moving back through the tunnels. And so you'll see that all the outside, everything you see in there that's outside, it's in the grids, is where they put the books. Total stack solid volume. And all those shapes, that's the programmatic volume. And then there's these odd diagrams of the, so let me just for a second. The idea was you would take a subway, that 4-floor space right there in the middle, 10,000 people could land on this space. Then you would take what amounts to a vertical subway up, and you would go into one of the reading rooms or program rooms, and then you go back and you go take the subway up. So the idea was to embrace as a positive experience a completely new kind of personality that had nothing to do with walking down a boulevard to a grand, a grand arrival building. And then all of these, this is a solid void reversal model. So what you see is a solid, those were voids, those were the reading spaces, and everything else would have been solid, and those are the elevators. Now what's weird is you can see it kind of here. You see that tilted, that's the storage space. That's the thing that's labeled storage in the Cindy Sherman. And the reason for that is You see that background? That's a boule. Isn't it boule? A big space, sort of to try to represent the quality of that, those big reading spaces. But there are the subway tracks. Not a mention of them, just there. But if you're careful and you watch, you can see the subway. Now, for a long time, I was the only person that knew this existed. You can find every book it's published in. You can't, it's not set out as a flip page. And then I lectured about it so long, you can go now on Tumblr. If you look on Tumblr, and if you look it up, it's on, just, every time I come up with something decent, they just stick it on a web. And then the last page is this. You know, Cindy Sherman, the librarian. Doesn't make any sense at all. But the reason that that thing is tilted on the left, you see it's tilted? And the only reason, because it's storage. Does anybody know what the reason is? Is that's the only way you can get that cut to do that. You can't, in other words, if they make horizontal cuts, if that thing is completely horizontal, it won't make that flip book effect. So the whole point of that, I mean, that's what's great about Rem, is he would change the whole diagram. Now, you ask him, he'll say, bull, oh, I didn't do that. It had to be tilted because of the structure. I mean, he will lie his butt off. So these are the three competition entries. The one on the left is a head. The next thing, the head becomes a cube and is a solid. And the last thing, you get this X-ray of a head. I was going to show you a fantastic clip of the to be or not to be speech. It won't work. But the reason for that is both 16th century, what do you call it? Neither Shakespeare nor Rembrandt knew what a self was. So there was no to be or not to be as an introspective self-speech. That was invented by Laurence Olivier in a movie after reading Freud. So I was going to show you this incredible invention in which he invents this. And so what you see in that is you see the back of his head, and he's just getting ready to say to be or not to be. Maybe I can just listen. Oh, you can see it. Zeebrugge. Bibliotech. The brain. Incredible. So, anyway, the way that maps on those three projects is, I know it's totally ridiculous and totally me, but that didn't exist. Actually, the way that it's written in the Shakespeare is Ophelia's on stage, and Claudius is just off the stage. So it's intended to be heard. It's a false soliloquy meant to advance the plot. So there is no hair-pulling psychoanalytic drama in the play at all. That's an invention of Laurence Olivier to overthrow the rule of his teacher and best friend, John Gielgud, who had turned Shakespeare primarily into a poetic, a way of reading poetry. But in order to do that, he put him outside, he turned it into not spoken, and he made it psychoanalytic. It's quite amazing. So Koolhaas is constantly using casting against type. How does the building change you into a different kind of character? So when he does Prada, and he wants to he doesn't want to be critical of commercialism, but he wants to intensify the commercialism of Prada's Prada is trying to sell you already a different character. So what he wants to do is intensify that, and the way he does that is invent this theater. So you see all of those steps are actually bleacher seating for a theater. There's the theater. You can see it open day and night. It's not open there. Now it's open. Almost never used. But the fact of the matter is what it does is constantly let everyone know that there is theater in the place, that they're on set, they're on stage, people are looking at them, they're looking at each other, and that intensifies the self-consciousness of buying costumes. It's an amazing idea. He takes it even further at Cardiff, in which this the single surface starts in the Mesian space. You can see it in the section. Starts here. Notice in principle, it starts here, goes around. Not only does it go around, it includes the stage, goes back around, and picks up all the balconies. So everybody, from the people in the lobby, to the people in the good seats, to the people on the stage, to the people in the balcony, are all of a sudden made one common personality. It's an amazing project. The only bad part is that to have a fire door, so this is a 20-ton metal door that between every act, to separate the lobby from the act, this fire door has to come up and come down. And so the minute the fire marshal saw it, didn't even make it to the second round. But a pretty great project. All right, so I'm getting late, so I think I'll skip. So this is Seattle. So that's not a real garden. Now it's a not real garden become a rug. So just so you know, this building is about this. That's Seattle, and all this stays Seattle. And you know that because it's curtain wall. Everything up here turns diagonal wall. You're leaving Seattle. And you know you leave Seattle because all the decorations, all the costume, all the Cindy Shermanization of Seattle is taking you out of Seattle. So there, all the surfaces, and you'll notice every surface is decorated, and there's a standard idea in Dutch architecture. Now, see, this is the wrong picture. This picture is supposed to be showing you, see how that lets you know you're not in Seattle because there's Seattle, whereas this picture doesn't tell you that. Okay, I'll skip ahead. And Naugahyde. Now that's why, when you see Anne Hamilton's reading room, a beautiful work of art, it's totally wrong for this library. She's a great artist. She's here. You should make every effort to see and hear her. She's a phenomenologist. These are quotations from 13 books in 13 different languages that are in the library. But it's about grounding you in the reality and the importance of knowledge being there. So it's totally antithetical to the idea of the library as it's portrayed by Rem. Rem is getting you out. It's getting you out of the character of the library, getting you out of Seattle, and she just wants to put you right back in. Just in case you don't believe me and the stuff about the staircase, here's a building that's trying to get you the hell out of Portugal. So notice that there's a new ground and actually such weird staircases it makes it look like a spaceship. So I've shortcut this. Now, in the end of SMXL, I'm about to quit, but in the end of SMXL, there's a closing library. This library is the Jishu Library. And just to give you a quick idea, the Jushu library is the Maison domino diagram on the left, doubled, put on top of each other. It was supposed to be 2 3-story libraries. He just took the Maison domino. He twisted it around a little bit using the idea of the voyeuristic idea of the Guggenheim Museum, and then he gets this. Now, in the Maison domino, when you're in the Maison domino, Corb's idea was everybody would look out of the horizon. Everybody would look out of the ribbon windows and share a kind of communal, equalizing potential, sort of a community idea of a reality, of the erasure of the sky and the ground, and a kind of political idea of this space, this idea of a democratizing space. What Koolhaas says, and you can see that the staircases on the corners are really important. See those? Is when you're in there, instead of looking out, you actually, like when you're at the Guggenheim, you stare at people inside the library while they're staring at you and you don't know it. So it is actually a Cindy Sherman machine. Perfect Cindy Sherman machine. And that is who. Remember, 1993 is when this library competition is done, just after, or just as he's making this book. So in my opinion, that's where she is. That's where she's looking. That's what this picture is about. I'm going to do one last project for you, and then show you a couple of quick pictures. This is the Miami Concert Hall competition entry in Florida, won by Cesar Pelli. The site was one of the cheapest and poorest sites you can get in all of Miami, because rich people bought the cheapest land to build their concert hall. And they said specifically, make sure no one had to walk from the parking lot to the concert hall, because it was dangerous. And so his idea was to put 2 glass boxes, 3 glass boxes. The one on the left is a symphony hall, the one on the right is an opera house, and the one in the middle is what he called the mixing chamber. And they were supposed to be cut out like, look like diamond jewels, like jewels. And then the interior was going to echo something like a modernized version of the Gautier Opera House in Paris. All the seats were going to be gold, the curtains were going to be gold lame, and then there was going to be in gold rings. Ultra luxurious. And then, so this is the opera house that they were going to use, and then this was the version that they were going to do. So instead of a ceiling painting, what they were going to do is he put in the competition entry without references, 6 Cindy Sherman. Those are Cindy Shermans at the top. So there's the gold lame. So, and then you could, now the point would be, poor people could drive up underneath the overpass, sit and look at the mixing chamber and watch all the people in costume going to the opera as a free opera, as they acted out the various characters, right there. And then Cindy Sherman would be looking down at them, confirming to them, as their gold jewelry reflected their own wealth back at them, the degree to which they had been put into character. I don't know, you getting it? So this is the last project. This is the first project not done by Koolhaas, not to appear right after the publication of the book. And these are the characters on the thing. Okay, bear with me 1 second. This is Dubai. Now, this is going to take 1 second. I think you might just enjoy this. When Rem and I were close at one time, and a long time ago, people used to do this indiscriminately. So they would give you would go to, if you were friends and you would write about them, they would give you access to their FTP sites. you know, you get a code, and the code would last 48 hours. And usually, because FTP sites were fairly slow, it would take 4 or 5 hours to get what you needed. So I would go to people's FTP sites and just take everything. Literally take as much as I could get for the 48 hours. And sometimes I wouldn't look at it for years. And so I've got an incredible amount of stuff from RIM's site. So I had this project for Dubai. Jared, are you here? Hey, wait, hey, just look at this picture. Just that one. You know what it is, don't you? It's from. Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is the actual presentation RIM made to the Prince Talal, who just went to jail, by the way, who was in Dubai as one of the financiers, lending the money from Saudi Arabia for this tower called the Renaissance Tower of Dubai. And it was going to be this tower that sat in the middle of the bay and rotated. And I'm just going to talk about a little bit about the cinematic impulse. So this is a serious project that RIM is presenting to these, you know, Arab sheiks and princes and to get this tower built. And so this is the actual presentation. Starts here. You know, it's typical plans. This is how it works. Then you get this picture. This is a kind of funny picture. You won't recognize this picture, but it comes from 2001, where the monolith is on the moon. So yeah, there it is. There's the monolith, there's the moon. This is from the movie, this is from RIM. But he puts it not in an advertisement or not in a lecture, but in his actual presentation to his client. This is, I think, an amazing thing. I'm not sure what message does that give. That you know, but wait till it gets worse, or it gets better. So there's the picture. I mean, there's the, now, this thing is in the middle of the bay, and it's rotating 24 hours a day, violating all the sanctity of relationship to the ground. It's one of the most incredible, so it draws its energy from its relationship to the palms. Then, get this picture. Now, this is an even better picture. This is a picture. Anish Kapoor did this artwork in the Tate Museum. But that picture is a combination of, from Dr. Strangelove, from the war room of Dr. Strangelove. Now, he's taken the Anish Kapoor, which was an eavesdropping and listening device, and he puts it in the war room as a kind of sculptural decoration. This is one of the most evil, insidious, insulting, puts the sheik around the war room under this Anish Kapoor. You know, it makes some incredible claims. And notice, yeah, there it is. Anish Kapoor is going to do it. Is going to, you know. So just to close, the last thing Cindy Sherman are these Dowager photographs. I think they're kind of funny. They all look like my aunt. Do they all look like your aunt? So I don't know. He did this the Prada Foundation. Have y'all seen it in Milan? I think it's a pretty neat building. It's incredibly awkward. It's gold-plated. It's got these pieces that don't fit on it. It looks intentionally like a dowager. It looks just like these people. So when you start to see Musa, when you start to see her, you think it constantly looks like she looks like Cindy Sherman. Right? She has an incredible ability to look like a Cindy Sherman in every photograph. I just thought to myself, that's kind of an amazing talent. Wait, but then I want you to see this. There's 2 more slides. I just want you to see them. I don't know, did y'all know anything about that? I mean, I'm just trying to tell you show you how far architecture's come. Do y'all know anything? Did y'all know anything about this? This is way past Cindy Sherman now. Don't worry about it. I know what I'm doing. This is all part of the act. If I had only brought my glasses. If I only had... Okay, now, do y'all know about this? Are you seeing this? No. Okay, wait 1 second. No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. This one I can guarantee you you're going to see, because I want to know if you knew about it. Okay, but first of all, look at this. Here he is with Mary Tyler Moore. This is hilarious. Like, what's Ram Koolhaas doing with Mary Tyler Moore? Didn't you think Mary Tyler Moore was dead? Do y'all know who Mary Tyler Moore is? Look at this. It's pathetic. But let me just show you this one thing, and then you can all go. And you explain to me, how does something like this happen? This is the 2016. This is like way past Cindy Sherman. This is a 2016 AIA National Convention. Anybody go? Because this was the poster.
The one in Philadelphia?
Yeah. Okay, look who's there. Ram Koolhaas, Kevin Spacey, and Neri Oxman. Y'all aren't in total shock about that? I mean, oh my God. Cindy Sherman couldn't come up with anything near that utterly, frighteningly ridiculous. Now, which one of those people doesn't belong there? Neri Oxman. Y'all don't know who Neri Oxman is, do you? That's good. At least I feel better. Kevin Spacey was there because architecturally he's there because... Good point. I don't know. All right, thanks.